Let's start that again. You probably didn't hear me. I'm sorry. Greetings and welcome to this inaugural and special edition of Archaeothoughts. I'm your host, Bill Octor. Today we want to talk about a topic that's on the mind of the world right now, COVID-19. In particular, how this pandemic is affecting archaeological places and the people who do archaeology. From academic studies to students, heritage professionals to public archaeologists. What are archaeologists doing when there is no work? How are sites being preserved when there are no caretakers watching them? We will tackle some of the social ramifications of the pandemic, such as panic buying, the disregard of social distancing, and sort of the other warnings, and the blatant racism attributed to this virus, aimed at, in particular, those of East Asian descent, and even more particular, those of Chinese descent. So, with that in mind, we do offer a content warning right now. We are going to be having an unvarnished look at these subjects. If the pandemic or topics associated with it are a little too raw for you at this moment, that's fine, that's okay. But this is YouTube, you can always come back and watch this later. If you are watching now and wish to participate, please put your questions in the chat, which I think are, that side if you're watching on your computer, and down here if you're watching on your phone. Maybe. And we will try to answer as many questions as we can during this process. So, without further ado, I will let our esteemed panel introduce themselves. Who wants to go first? We'll let Stitch go first. Like, seriously, like, somebody introduce themselves. Can nobody hear me?
I'll go. I'm Jolene Smith. I work for the state government. I'm an archaeologist for the state government. And, talk to a lot of folks on Twitter about things and collaborate throughout the archaeological community to do sort of digital things in general.
Cool. I'll go next. My name is Dr. Michael Rivera. I'm a Filipino Chinese gay guy from Hong Kong, and I currently live in the Netherlands. I'm an academic as well. I got my PhD in biological anthropology in the UK, and I host a podcast called the Archaeothoughts podcast, where I interview students and experts about the work that they're doing in archaeology and anthropology. My academic research is all about looking at human skeletons from prehistory, trying to figure out what they were eating, what they were doing, signs of disease, from looking at their bones and their teeth. Otherwise, I'm also very interested in a history of racism, living human biology today. And with that said, what an interesting time to be alive, interested in biology, racism, and disease. Am I right?
It's like everything you've trained for has led to this moment. You're like those that family in Signs where all your little things all meet up to this point.
Yeah, feels great.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Alex Fitzpatrick. I am a zooarchaeologist and a PhD student currently at the University of Bradford in the UK. And I host a podcast called Archaeoanimals, and I'm wearing a Stitch onesie right now.
So lastly, we have Chris.
Yeah, I'm Chris Sims. I co-host the Go Dig a Hole podcast. I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm a CRM archaeologist with a nationwide firm here. And so I work all throughout the Pacific Northwest on cultural resources projects.
And I'm Bill Octor. I'm a CRM archaeologist who is with my own sort of separate illness, has nothing to do with this particular one, it happened beforehand, and haven't been working in a while. But you may have seen me on Twitter and this channel was mostly gaming before that, Archeo Gaming, and my other channel, Archeo RPG, where we're looking at the intersection of archaeology and tabletop role-playing games, as well as having our own live archaeologist talk show there called Still Digging over there. So that's how I'm still keeping up with everything while I'm out of the field at the moment. So with that in mind, let's just sort of jump into sort of some of the elements that are being affected right now with this virus right now. Right now we're seeing primary schools being delayed, if not having their entire year canceled. We're seeing at the university levels either classes canceled for indefinite amount of times, or this rapid switch to an online program, which it wasn't designed to move this quickly to do that. We have people who are in the middle of graduate programs, who are trying to keep the normal when there is no normal. So anyone want to think about, like, some of the things that we're running into right now, maybe even personally, or things you're seeing or have seen on the interwebs or on the YouTube? Me and Bernie were talking about the YouTube.
I think like a lot of universities around the world have canceled their classes, or they're moving online, and I think that this is the responsible decision for the sake of community health. That said, that'll always remain true, I think, but for some, I just think like a lot of sacrifice, of course, goes into enrolling in the first place and pursuing studies year to year. Even though it's the responsible thing to do, I think a lot of people are struggling with this situation. On the flip side, I also know a lot of students and staff, they a little bit are feeling some sense of relief that while they have to deal with the anxieties and stresses at home with their families and their loved ones and thinking about where to get groceries and toilet paper, at least they don't also have their studies to contend with, and they can just concentrate on this. So lots of like different sides to this this thing that's happening to us at the moment.
Yeah, and in terms of where archaeology, kind of intersects with academia, I think field work is a big part of it, and we're seeing a lot of field schools being canceled. And to echo what Michael just said, I think that's the right call. I think that there's no way to take it too seriously, especially as the situation is kind of rapidly evolving for most parts of the world right now. So better to play it safe than sorry. But it's certainly a disruption to everybody's way of life. Sorry, there's blue clucking in neighbors right now.
I think that our institutions at least here in the U.S. for sure are definitely in a period of maybe wishful thinking. With this, we'll be closed for a few weeks kind of thing. I'm not sure whether that's. I'm my inkling that is undershot, and we're going to be in a different mode for a really long time. Maybe academia is going to be more realistic, but I'm not even quite sure. So it seems like we're really all adjusting the day-to-day what our expectations of all this kind of are, which is sort of a shame because other countries, especially Asian countries, they probably have a lot to teach us that we're not really listening to at this point.
Yeah, one of the huge issues as well with archaeology, in particular in academia, is that how can you teach half of that stuff online? Speaking from as a zooarchaeologist, I know that a lot of other zooarchaeologists who teach zooarchaeology courses are kind of freaking out because they're like, we need labs. Like, we can't have our students be learning about this stuff without having the material hands-on. Although I saw one person suggests that students go out and buy their own dead animal to process, which I mean is something I do in my spare time, but I don't think every student wants to do that. And then speaking as a PhD student, who's currently writing up their thesis right now during all this, I'm dying, so.
I was about to ask you, how are you?
I'm wearing a Stitch onesie.
In terms of these classes that are being taken online, it makes me think a lot about accessibility even before this crisis, and our classes should already be accessible. But a lot of the universities, especially those more set in their ways, more traditional and not up to date with how computers and the internet can facilitate teaching, just not enough time or resources have been devoted to learning how to do it. And so now we have professors and lecturers trying to teach archaeology or anthropology who have to switch their classes online in the space of a week. And this has led to a lot of anxiety among those teaching and those learning. Yeah.
And I think there's another thing going on. I mean, we've seen this here in the United States. A lot of schools, at least early on, when they were closing campus, would also be in the process of evicting students from the campus, which has caused a little bit of distress because it's not easy for every student to leave it, whether or not you're an international student, whether or not you can't afford the U-Haul, whether or not you don't have a home to go to. On that, there's many circumstances like that. So sort of this rush to clear out the schools, including the people on them, has definitely been a process that I've been seeing a lot on here. And I know that affects all students, but it's also going to affect the students of archaeology right now.
Yeah, exam season is just around the corner, in April to July around the world, and for many reasons, uncertainty lies in whether these take place at all, and if they do, whether they should be held at home or in very isolated spaces on campuses, whether they should be open book, whether they should be doing it online using a program that disallows Google searches. Some argue out there that people should just give everyone a pass for this semester because it's tough enough, and let's just get on with it. But then that being said, also something else that happens every summer is, of course, it's graduation season, and many are upset and stressed out by the fact that they've worked 3 years or 4 years for a degree in archaeology. Now the chance to celebrate that effort and sacrifice at a graduation ceremony could potentially be gone. It really highlights to me there's so many different aspects to what we do in academic archaeology and anthropology, and each of those things are affected by COVID presently.
Yeah, it's a reminder that that we as a society have so many social things and social connections. It's not just we go to school. The act of going to school, the act of meeting up with the people, the act of studying, the act of going to graduation with the ceremony that's going on and those events there. These are all sort of norms that we're used to. It's sort of seeing some of the bad examples. I live near a college here near Baltimore, University of Maryland, Baltimore College, and the day after they closed campus because COVID, I was looking on the local Facebook group, and there were plenty of complaints because college students would then turn around and go have a party because that's what you do when there's no school. And on one level, it's perfectly natural because that's what you do. The other side of this coin is that we're in a world right now where you can't do that anymore. It's not for yourself and for those around you. You can't do those norms anymore. So there's a lot of breaking of mental habits that's having to go on right now. But one group of folks who are used to uncertain futures and the apocalypse would be CRM and heritage professionals. Because I'm checking with my folks, and I know folks who are still out there doing field work right now, because it's local jobs, and CRM kind of invented social distancing. You're staying 50 feet, 15 meters apart from each other at all times. So Chris, how's that CRM?
Yeah, 15 meters. You're doing a tight grid there. It's good.
East Coast, right? Well, we do things proper on the East Coast.
Shots fired.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only 20 meters here. No, it's, COVID-19 is certainly disrupting all facets of archaeology. And so what I'm seeing already in CRM is some projects are having to be delayed due to safety concerns. And the safety concerns for CRM really throw a wrench into a lot of things. So, here in Portland, the situation is unfolding pretty quickly. It seems like every day the measures are getting stricter, which is good. But down in Bay Area, California, the whole area is on lockdown and people are ordered to shelter in place. And so projects just aren't happening in Bay Area right now. And so one of the considerations we have to take, I think no matter where you are doing CRM archaeology, is the logistics that you would normally take for granted as business as usual would involve things like packing a bunch of people into a work vehicle, going into a hotel room, going into restaurants, perhaps even sharing Airbnbs or short-term rentals for projects, or even having a digging partner. Those are the kinds of things that we're having to rethink and having to reconsider for the safety of everybody, not just the people on the crew, but the people that our crews are interacting with when they come home. And me personally, I have 2 projects at a high school, and classes have been canceled for at least until the end of April here in Oregon by the governor's order. And it's more than likely that classes will be canceled later. I saw yesterday Kansas was the first state to just cancel the rest of the school year. And so while that doesn't necessarily pose like a barrier to our crews going on to the school campus, one of the projects is an architecture history survey. And so we have to send archaeologists or architectural historians into the buildings to take photos of historic structures, and right now that's not safe. And Bill, you mentioned business can keep going as usual as long as it's local work, because you don't have to take into account long driving distances with crews, hotel rooms, restaurants, food, stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of the bigger engineering firms are just sort of scrapping corporate travel, period. So you're not going to get authorization for travel.
Yeah, absolutely.
But one thing I'm sort of wondering about, and I'm sure there are projects out there like this, projects that are sort of stopped midstream. What kind of precautions can you or have they taken to sort of like protect the site? Like, if you have a partially exposed site, depending on the sensitivity of it, it could either be, you could just leave it there forever and no one cares, or you run the risk of disturbance occurring before you get back.
Yeah, well, thankfully I haven't encountered that on any of our projects, because that's quite a pickle. But you have to, as archaeologists and heritage professionals, you have to consider protecting the resources. So that's a good point. So what do? Do you backfill and just excavate your own backfill when you can come back out to it? I don't really know the right answer.
Yeah, I would recommend, if you're in the middle of like a test unit excavation, a block excavation right now, and you get called off it, throw those tarps in there, protect the resources, and backfill, because you don't know it. Consider it like an end-of-season excavation, because you don't know when you're coming back.
Yeah, I would agree. And from the state perspective, and I'm sure this is not limited to the U.S., I'm anticipating that we're going to see lots of sort of unexpected slowdowns in issuing permits and things like that, because people aren't able to be at their desk. And right now it's just because we're trying to figure out how to telework. But, over the next month or so, this could get really intense with, folks not being able to work because, they may not be ill, or they don't have resources and things like that. So I would also say that any site you're closing up, just plan for indefinite closure, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm guessing this is also going to slow down things like reviewing of reports and research and all that other kind of stuff, because you can't get to the library. I mean, like in Virginia, I know they have a great digital service, but there's still some things you need to get from the library.
In Virginia, at least, our reading room is completely closed to public visitors, technically by appointment only, but really we'll just have to get you what you need manually. And if our office does close officially to staff, then that will stop the 30-day federal clock for review requirements. And that's going to be sort of nationwide as far as I know. Hopefully we won't get to that point. And right now we're trying to keep things moving really quickly. But we could be totally stopped for some unknown period of time.
And if you have to wait until the situation dies down, I imagine, because I don't work in CRM, I imagine you would have to ask funders or states or clients for extensions on the projects that you said that you could accomplish by a certain time.
Absolutely. And then on the Michael, you bring up a good point about the business end of things. Is if we can't finish our projects, then we can't invoice for our projects, and if we can't invoice for our projects, then we can't pay our crews. Mm-hmm. And it's we're looking at an economic crisis that is being exacerbated by a public health crisis, or vice versa. A public health crisis that has caused an economic crisis. And so I think it's unfortunately just the beginning of what we're about to see. And so, I'm seeing a lot of mutual aid disaster relief funds being set up to take care of workers that are being, laid off or having slowdowns. But, we're looking at kind of, it could change the industry if people have to just be out of work for a couple months. A lot of people are working paycheck to paycheck, but a lot of businesses are working paycheck to paycheck too. So it could be pretty bleak.
And for a lot of those in CRM, especially field technicians, it's a double whammy, because their CRM gig has dried up on them, but typically also their backup gig, which is normally somewhere in the service economy, somewhere in a restaurant, a delivery, some other sort of service thing that they can go in and out of on a flexible basis, that has also dried up on them. So they've sort of lost both of their main sources of income, and they're sort of on the hook at this point. So yeah, if you are in a place to sort of offer your colleagues help or mutual aid and things like that, keep an eye on those things for around you. This is the time for us to help each other. We're sort of seeing external help, depending on where you're at, is a little slower. But the one thing we can do is help each other. And that can be virtually too, through things like us talking to you today, through Twitter, but also, check up on the elderly in your building, put notes under their door, letting them know that if they need anything from the store, you can go get it for them and things like that, so they don't have to leave their apartments and things like that. So there's lots of things you can do to offer mutual aid, both really close and a little further away.
Yeah, I would say actually, if anyone out there is an archaeologist, an academic, someone who works in museums, someone who does freelance, anybody who might be feeling the financial pressure at the moment, it's no guarantee, but I would actually recommend talking about it on social media if possible. Reach out to someone that you can trust, DM them, or tweet about it publicly. And I think I speak for everyone here. You can tag us and we'll try and amplify. We'll find someone, we'll amplify, and hopefully you'll be able to find someone who can help you and send you some cash. Maybe someone has some spare for your Venmo or your PayPal. Don't be afraid to reach out for help, because especially at this time, I think we all need it.
I mean, archaeology is a small community, so now more than ever, we need to take care of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
I hope,
Very well said.
everyone starts a podcast.
Well, this is not what everyone's going to do.
Well. Yeah, I mean, I assume everyone's going to start a podcast now, so
Because they have nothing else to do.
My assumption is that everyone's either going to start a podcast or become a live streamer, like a Twitch streamer. Some people have already done that.
I'm working on Fallout 3 right now for a Twitch stream, sort of a walk through the Capital Wastelands appropriately.
Oh, cool. I'm going to upload my consciousness to Animal Crossing on Friday, so I get it.
Maybe we should just have our webcams on all the time, like Big Brother, and people just watch everybody else
and then
struggling.
only find out this week that COVID-19 actually happened. No thanks.
Oh man,
that was not cool at all. But speaking of virtual and stuff like that, history and heritage also includes buildings and junk like that, our museums and our living history places and historic houses and plaques and all that kind of good stuff right there, which currently don't have any staff in the building. They're locked up. Well, most of them are locked up and things like that. So I was trying to think of some of the ways that you can keep the public engaged, especially since at this point, looking at the bright side of things, I do have, that's mostly gray, but there's some sun out there. At this point, we have a captive audience. They're all stuck at home. So how do we help bring, heritage and historic information to them during this time of crisis?
Can I just say that my hat goes off right now to anybody whose job it is to do digital outreach for these organizations, because they are currently pulling so much weight, and it doesn't seem like that's going to end anytime soon. So whereas that is not my role myself, I'm just watching in awe at all the wonderful work that people are hustling to do.
Yeah, it's if you just Google digital museums, you can get hundreds and hundreds of museums around the world which have digital repertories of their collection online. Even some of it in 3D, which is always cool to play around with. And if you got a printer, you can print it at home and play with it. That's always fun too.
Yeah, I think it was Louis Bork set up a kind of a Google sheet that has an online directory, or a directory of all these online resources, and that's being shared pretty broadly. I think all of us have shared it on our social media. And I forget how many entries are in it now. It's something like 150 or 170
something like that.
entries. It's pretty cool.
I don't know who put my podcast on there, but thank you if you're listening to this.
Well, it should be. Your podcast
Yeah, same
should be
here.
on there, all right? Well, yeah. If you haven't, everybody's so humble right here. We have an international collection of broadcaster and digital archaeologists on here today. 3 podcasters, video, and a maven of digital archaeology.
I also would like to share, I think if you just Google anthropology and COVID-19, some anthropologists have also been putting together a lot of resources and links and podcasts and articles that talk about disease spread and from a more anthropological or historical perspective. So, one good thing that has come from this is that, people who care about each other are pooling the resources for teaching, and I think that's really awesome.
And sort of on the thinking back to, a million years ago, i.e. 3 days ago, or whatever it was, since time is meaningless now. When we were all concerned with the Society for American Archaeologists conference becoming canceled, because that was the biggest thing going on. And, whether we're talking about the short term, how we handle presenting our work and collaborating, like right now for this April meeting versus whatever this new normal is going to be, there's a lot of collaborative work going around right now, also sort of aggregating resources for distributed conferences and figuring out ways to present our academic work in different ways, whether or not it's because of COVID-19 or, also useful for accessibility purposes and to, help lessen our carbon footprints and stop us from flying across the Atlantic 4 times a year. So sort of watch that space because there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. And Michael, you had a great idea. You posted on Twitter a few days ago that anybody who cannot present their conference presentation could join your podcast and give their 15-minute segment, and they can even go over on time now, and it doesn't hurt anybody.
Yeah, and there are no comments or a question from the audience.
Oh no, there's the comments section on the iTunes.
True. You just don't read those. You just don't read them.
Never read them.
Never read the
This
comments.
is sort of really exciting to me, though, this sort of renegade spin-off way of presenting our work, because for some people that might be the absolutely most ideal venue, is a 15-minute time slot where they get to talk and don't have to plan for hostile comments. It's very important. I don't know. I'm really excited in general.
Or if you like hostile comments, you make a 15-minute video and put it on YouTube, and then you will get all the hostile comments.
There was a conference, I was really excited for this next month, but I was scheduled to go to a big bioanthropology conference in LA next month, and it was canceled for all the right reasons, for public health reasons. But yeah, one really big downside to it is that a lot of young scholars and junior scholars and BIPOC scholars, this is the one chance to have that community, to have that opportunity to present their work and to try and vie for jobs and all this kind of thing. It's really tough, for a lot of them, that they don't get to present anymore.
Yeah, so it's important. I mean, and there's also, I know for the last couple of years, Public Archaeology has done a Twitter conference over the past few years on that. So there's multiple platforms now. I mean, we could do a Tumblr conference and a TikTok conference. I'll let somebody else do that.
Oh my God.
Somebody else can do the TikTok conference. I'm out of my league.
I'm still thinking about the Tumblr conference. What year is it?
Just
2009?
I'll just upload pictures of sunsets and sushi.
Yes. The live journal conference.
Can we bring back our old social media stuff? Because I'll bring back my really sad Tumblr from 2009 to 2013 and do a conference on there.
Next, you're going to tell me we can't do a live journal conference.
GeoCities, Zanga.
We're going to do a Neopets conference. Everyone ready?
Yes.
I'd be into that.
There are animals there. You'll love it, no?
Michael is way too excited for the Neopets conference.
Yep.
One cool thing that's been happening is I've seen a lot of people kind of adapting to digital tools in interesting ways that kind of replicate our social lives. And so some of my friends are having like a digital happy hour with each other. And so this Friday I'll be hosting a digital happy hour with Go Dig a Hole. So our crew's gonna just have a Zoom link, and I'll post that on social media. So anybody who wants to join can join. You don't have to have alcoholic beverages. We can just, find a place to just like chat and, reflect on the week and brainstorm and just, shoot the shit and get to know each other. Like I'm finding that with my friends, I'm talking to my friends more, which is kind of an unexpected and positive thing.
We should be reaching out to each other. I'm doing a Call of Cthulhu night on Friday night. I reached out to figured my way of reaching out to other archaeologists out there through a post out there on Twitter. Figure, like, hey, you stuck at home? You want to play some games? Let's play some games. So we can use these digital tools, which have been isolating us for the past 15, 20 years, to actually bring us together a little bit. Weird. So with that, see, we're stalling right now, because with that, we need to make the turn. We've been sort of relatively positive, or at least forward-thinking, about addressing what's going on with COVID-19, how we can positively address going forward with it as both individuals and heritage professionals. But as heritage professionals with our anthropology backgrounds, we can't help but also observe the world around us and the behavior of our fellow humans around us. And I think, we're still in the middle of it. We do not know what this world will be at the end. I think, there's no such thing as being too dramatic at this point. Do democracies fail? Does capitalism fall? Does it go right back to the status norm when corporations swoop in and take over everything at the end? Or anything in between? Or it goes and we just all forget about it and it's like it never happened. But
You mean continue to take over everything, right?
yeah, it's just a status quo then. But during this time, we are seeing some behaviors, which are old behaviors, amplified. We're seeing some weird, different behaviors. So I guess we could start with some of the easiest ones and then jump into the hard one. Probably the hard one in the middle, actually. Let's talk about this panic shopping.
So I am actually really curious about this. Like on Monday, my boyfriend and I went to do our doomsday shopping. And I don't know, lots of stuff was gone from the supermarket, obviously, and especially toilet paper. How have you dealt with groceries in this time of you're supposed to isolate yourself?
Yeah, me personally, my wife and I went out. I forget what day it was. It was last week. We've basically, long story short, we've had to make a lot of trips to the grocery store just to try and find anything. And so the first day that we went to kind of stock up on things, it took us 5 hours to go to 3 different grocery stores. And everything was really picked over. There was, hardly any meat, no cleaning supplies, no medicine, no toilet paper, and oddly, like no dog food. So it just took a lot of time to get anything useful to kind of stock up so that we could, practice social distancing for a while and just hole up at our home. It's taking a lot more time to get anything useful. And I'm sure everybody else has experienced the disruptions to the supply chain, like even ordering on Amazon, it's not a perfect solution, but now it's an even less perfect solution, because the closest time that they can even ship anything like cleaning supplies is at least a month out now. So, like Bill alluded to entering this segment, we're watching the state fail. We're watching capitalism fail. And it's, I guess to like bring it back to something like forward thinking and positive is, we're looking at, unfortunately, a lot of small businesses are facing some pretty dire straits, but the interesting ways that they are adapting are, trying to pass emergency legislation locally to like allow curbside delivery. I'm seeing a lot of like restaurants and even breweries and bars and stuff suddenly being able to pass alcohol sales to do curbside delivery of beer and stuff like that, whereas I think without this emergency situation, that kind of legislation just wouldn't be allowed at all. So some people are innovating, but yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like the state has failed us, and unfortunately, we can't just GoFundMe our way out of this crisis. The state has to step in and support all the people who are being hurt by this.
I would also say like and also like the big corporations too, because I think today or yesterday I did see like a smaller supermarket say during this we're going to allocate times for people to sign up to come to the supermarket so that we can not have everybody like in the same space, because that's not safe, and then especially have some hours just for senior citizens and elderly people to go shop. I thought that was a really awesome move, but it'd be really great if like Costco or Walmart would do that, or here like Asda or Tesco or Albert Heijn or Lidl would do that too. That I think is a great like responsibility that big corporations could take.
I began my hoarding about a month ago because being a news junkie, I was paying attention to what was going on in China and going, shit. Knowing that it was going to come here. And so we got most of our stuff. We still had to go out for the last 2 weeks, but the toilet paper situation was okay in the house, so we didn't have to worry about that too much. Even though my wife was like, we were walking around going, maybe we can get one more emergency package. And then she's looking and she's like, I can't find my brand. Like, there's like 6 left on the shelf right now. Just pick one. There's nothing here. But yeah, but still though, with the paper product though, I'm wondering if it goes back to sort of that cliche, which is a truism, of sort of that bread, milks, and toilet papers during times of crisis, especially within an American trope, if nothing else. When a big hurricane's coming, when a big winter storm is coming, you get bread, milk, and toilet paper. So, on some levels, toilet paper is seen as a comfort item. If you have plenty of toilet paper, things will be fine. That is like one explanation I can have for why people would get into fistfights over a packet of toilet paper in a Costco.
I'm not sure if you can see my stockpile behind me. It's just one pack of toilet paper. It's nothing crazy. Incidentally, it's behind my chair right now because I don't have any closet space.
Okay. Ooh, we have a question now. We have a question from Megan. Hi, Megan. Thank you. Do you guys have any must-read books or paper suggestions to stay up to date on archaeology or anthropological ideas during this downtime? It all depends on your interest. Like, I would go Shanks and Tilly, but that's because that's me.
Yeah, not to change the subject too much, but I'm finding that I'm not having any downtime at all. It's much less downtime than I expected, with family obligations, but also just not being able to focus on anything for more than, 19 seconds at a time because I am 1,000 yards staring off into the distance thinking about global catastrophes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, tiny, short format reading would be lovely for me.
Yeah, like I'm in the middle, like I said, I'm in the middle of writing out my PhD. I literally can't see myself reading anything that's not my PhD right now. That doesn't mean I'm not doing it. Everything that else I'm reading is not archaeological related at all. So sorry if you were expecting like an archaeology related thing. I'm just really, my brain can only take so much. I love archaeology. I don't want to read it for fun right now. Thanks.
Yeah. I'm finding myself reading fiction right now, or just listening to podcasts that are like funny, because we all need a laugh right now. But I do have a couple archaeology / history and culture related books that I've been interested in lately that have been good reads. One is Built on Bones by Brenna Hassett. It's called Built on Bones, 15,000 Years of Urban Life and Death. The cover looks like that.
Yeah, that's a good book.
Yeah, it's a really good book. It kind of follows the archaeology of death and burial and how kind of societies have been built around that for the last 15,000 years.
A good distraction for the times.
Yeah, and then there's one that's very specific. It's called Dangerous Subjects by Kenneth Coleman. And it's a really interesting story that it's like mostly historical nonfiction, but it kind of weaves a fiction-ish story about a man named James Sauls, who, without giving out any spoilers, he was a black man in the pre-Civil War on the East Coast, and I can't remember exactly where, but it follows historical accounts of how this man gained freedom from slavery and joined the USXX, the Expeditionary Force, and so he ended up sailing around the world and was marooned several times, shipwrecked, survived several shipwrecks, and then found himself in the Pacific Northwest before the wagon trains came over. And so it takes a really interesting view on how the Pacific Northwest was a multi-ethnic society before the Oregon Trail happened. And so it looks at kind of the ways the black exclusion laws happened in the Pacific Northwest and kind of the racial undertones of the Civil War and westward expansion and settler colonialism and genocide and all that. And so it's just like such a fine grained focus on one man's life, and he has such a fascinating life that it's just a really interesting read. It's a really fast read. So again, that's Dangerous Subjects by Kenneth Coleman.
I suspect formal articles or ebooks about COVID are currently being written right now by a lot of people working very quickly and very hard. As I mentioned earlier, there is a compilation of materials of this nature by anthropologists, and if you just Google COVID-19 anthropology syllabus, you will find a long list of resources about COVID, the anthropologist's role in epidemic times, how it relates to gender, race, disability, health infrastructure, political economy. It's really good. And there's one article that I want to recommend by three anthropologists who are tied to the University of Hong Kong, and it is on Anthropology News, and it is called Going Viral in Hong Kong, and they talk about they talk about the current coronavirus and the measures that Hong Kong healthcare infrastructure and government have taken, and trying to analyze the situation from an anthropological perspective. But on that syllabus is a really good list of stuff aside from that. So I recommend looking at that. And if you can't find the link, then tag me on Twitter and I'll link it to you.
And I'm reading two books right now. They're not directly anthropologically or archaeologically related, but I think they do tie in kind of to what our current events right now. I am reading Albert Camus' The Plague. I started that last night. One, it's a great book, and two, it's sort of an examination of what happens when a world goes mad during a time of crisis, kind of what we're doing right now. The other is Naomi Klein's disaster capitalism. No, shock doctrine. Shock doctrine is the one I'm reading right now, which talks about disaster capitalism. And so it's a reminder that while the world is falling apart, we should keep an eye out on those actors, both in government and in business and outside, who may be making power moves of their own. Not everyone is just worried about trying to make it to the next day. Other people are already planning on what they are going to do after this crisis is over and how they want to take advantage of the crisis. So it's a good way to sort of like observe the world, and so you as a person don't get surprised. You can sort of see it as it's coming towards you.
Yeah. Bill, Naomi Klein has a great follow-up book to Shock Doctrine. It's called No Is Not Enough. And the audiobook is really good too. It's narrated by Britt Marling. And so it follows up on the disaster capitalism and kind of catches us up to I think it was released in like 2017 or 2018. So we had already seen enough of the Trump administration's attempts at disaster capitalism and undermining all of our public services. But yeah, long story short, it's our administration is full of bad faith actors who are exploiting, failed infrastructure and social tensions to kind of make a bad situation worse.
And that's happening, I think, in Canada, the United Kingdom, Netherlands, China, India, Australia, in nations everywhere where there are some people with other agendas than public health.
Yeah, and speaking of bad faith assholes, another thing that we have with this thing is sort of unfortunate long tradition for the Americas and Europe, and I could say South America too, and probably everywhere else, is sort of the blatant racism that's being attached to this virus here, and it's not unique. At this point now, you have people who call it, the Wuhan virus, whereas the president calls it the Chinese virus. But this goes back. There was a flu epidemic in 1970, that was called the Hong Kong flu. In 1957 to 1958, that was called the Asian flu. So on one, so this idea of attaching place to the epidemics goes back, and on one level you could say, hey, we're just talking about where the origin it is, but that's not what happened. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is what happens commonly in white supremacist societies. There's a conflation between a nation and its people, that they become one and the same. So the Chinese virus now becomes, someone is in line at a store, they look a little Asian, they may speak in an Asian dialect, they now get chastised in public. Or just little snide comments here and there, little microaggressions to major aggressions that are occurring around the world right now. Or which was that in Belgium, where those dipshit kids posed for a picture in really, really offensive outfits?
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, yeah, that was like high school all over again when I saw those pictures.
That picture took a lot of setup too.
Yeah, but I mean that's not too far away from the Confederate dumbasses before all this happened.
Yeah. That's still going on.
Oh yeah,
Dave,
there was
can I
something going
just
on in Charlottesville recently, wasn't there? See, that got under the radar because of all this flu stuff.
on the naming part, the World Health Organization has said that we should refer to this thing as COV-2 or COVID-19. Even on that specific thing, a lot of scientists actually believe that it should be called SARS-CoV-2, and especially a group of scientists who work in Hong Kong, mainland China, and the US have argued that we should be just calling it by the scientific name, which is SARS-CoV-2, because that's what it is, first of all, so it's more accurate SciComm. And the WHO argued that we wanted this to be a world disease. We wanted to frame it as a world disease, almost in a way saying like they don't see race or don't see color or don't see nationality. Like it's that feeling that I get when I read this.
A post-racial disease.
Wow.
I know. And they said that by putting SARS in the name, people will definitely think about Hong Kong, my home. But it wasn't like SARS was only in Hong Kong, first of all. And the scientists actually believe that you just call it that because it would help the general public be more vigilant and primed to respond quickly, given that everybody knows the effect that SARS had. But regardless, like I think all of this stuff, the social repercussions, it really isn't the problem of scientists or governments or WHO, what they call it. It really is just racists in our society who use any excuse and any issue to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah. Even with the SARS name, that's interesting that you bring that up because, I mean, just my own personal reaction as a white American to SARS, like even remembering SARS from a very disconnected perspective here, it seemed like such an Asian thing. And I don't know, but to me it seems like a lot of Americans, specifically white Americans, would continue to sort of, if it's called SARS, that's still an Asian market thing. It's that lots of racist baggage with that as well. It is not obviously the acronyms problem.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of which, sort of as an aside for the moment, does anyone see the article in Nature that they had to do to show that SARS-CoV-2 was not manufactured in a laboratory and not a purposefully manipulated virus? They had to go to those points because of sort of these international political rumors that are occurring now, because there is statecraft going on right now between things like the United States and China over whispered rumors on who created it. Is this a bioweapon and things like that? So they actually had to do a study to confirm that. So that's the problem with this, is that, you're right, racism is an old friend of this world. But in this time, when we don't know what's going to happen, we don't know how the effects of racism are going to be. We don't know what the effects of anything are going to be right now. A bunch of yokels with their Confederate flags, marching in front of the Virginia State House, then going home that evening. That's the pre-COVID world. What do they do in the post-COVID world when, if there are more disruptions in the supply chain and things like that? Once, if we can't, if mutual aid begins to break down, which is why we need to keep doing it, do we start seeing even more of the uglier side of humanity start making its face? And I unfortunately feel that we will have nations in this world where that will occur, only because that's always occurred during times of stress on nations. Some nations will fail.
I mean, I know in the US, you're already seeing politicians saying, well, how are we going to hold China responsible for this? Which is a wild thing to say. And I live in the UK now, but I have family who still live in the US, and I'm low-key worried for them because, they're all Chinese, my Chinese family is in the US, and they've moved from New York to North Carolina. So I know that my grandparents have gotten some weird looks at when they're at the GP a couple weeks ago, and stuff like that. And I mean, it's not something I'm not used to, unfortunately, but hopefully it doesn't escalate. I know that there's been some cases of escalation, but anyone comes up to me, they'll square up. New York for life.
Yeah, living in Portland, I'm sure y'all have probably seen on the news how white supremacist militias often come and visit our city and hold little rallies, and they're looking for any excuse to kind of terrorize vulnerable members of the community. And if they don't get the fight they're looking for, they take the fight to whoever they can find. And so unfortunately, in the past, when they've come and staged their demonstrations and rallies, if they don't get to fight leftists, then they prowl around the city and they assault queer members of the community. And so there have been, a number of assaults on, trans members and gay members of the community. And that's the kind of violence that gets permitted by the state currently. And, to what Bill was saying, there are times when it really feels like that kind of violence is just being held back by a thread, and how long until that thread breaks? Because we already have people who are organized, these white supremacist militias. They're already armed, organized, and they already have a plan, and they're just waiting for a time to enact their plan. And so I think that's the kind of thing that we've got to look out for, and we've got to protect each other. Going back to like mutual aid, disaster relief is, a strong community is kind of the best defense against that kind of just chaotic violence.
Yeah, and that's a good way to sort of end this little part on, is a reminder that we aren't helpless in the face of that kind of stuff. We, support each other, support our communities, whether our direct communities around us and our virtual communities, to let, because most of these folks are cowards who want to pick on those they perceive to be weak, and we show a strong, united front. They will go elsewhere, or go home, preferably.
Yeah.
To Anglo-Saxon Germany, right?
Darn it, we don't have Tristan never showed up, so we can't jump onto the whole Anglo-Saxon thing. Sorry, Tristan. So, yeah, there's a pandemic going on. Not everything's going to be cheerful and rosy. But with that all in mind now, does anybody have sort of any last words as we sort of begin wrapping this up?
Stay home.
Stay home, wash your hands. Yeah, stay home, wash your hands. Please wash your hands.
Yeah, please wash your hands. I cannot believe that that's like the biggest thing that's come out of this so far is please, for the love of God, wash your hands.
Okay, I have a SciComm podcast. Okay, so viruses, they have a lipid membrane which has very important proteins that allow the virus to infect cells and perform the tasks of like multiplying and keeping them alive. What soap does, the soap molecules, they wedge themselves into the lipid membrane between them and prise them apart, and it destabilizes the whole system, and essential proteins that the viruses need to survive spill into the water, and that's how the viruses become useless. So that's why you wash your hands.
I thought you were going to announce that you'd never washed your hands, to be completely honest.
I learned how to wash my hands a week ago.
I was going to say, oh my God.
You just kind of like your jeans, you stick them in the freezer overnight, it cleans them right up.
Yeah.
Please don't do that.
Yeah. And then also kind of going back to mutual aid and something that we all talked about earlier is reach out to us. And, archaeology is a small community, but, let us know if you need help. And, if we can't give it to you directly, we'll find someone who can.
Yeah, all of our Twitters are right here, right around us.
And
I would love to just encourage people to be sort of gentle with themselves right now and not necessarily aspire toward peak productivity and all of this new time off we have, because it's okay. We're not going to be able to do that. Everything is completely weird, and in 2 hours we might be crying. It's okay.
And if you need to cry, cry. If you need to just sit down on the couch and stare into space, do that. All right? Give yourself the space
Yeah.
accept this.
Yeah.
This
Come up with a bat signal for your friends to let them know that you need a little bit of hello or something. Anything like that, really.
Yeah, and don't believe the hype that I would say. Don't believe the hype of people on Twitter being like, "Oh, Newton was like barricaded," and it's like, shut up. Who cares? You know what I'm gonna do this entire time? I'm gonna eat like 7 cartons of ice cream and play video games, and that's about it. Like, calm down. Like, you're not gonna do anything. Let's be real. You're gonna sit in your underwear just like the rest of us on Twitter for like a week.
I was gonna write the sequel to King Lear. That's what I was gonna do. But
hey, I'm gonna perform a good public service on a Twitch stream.
Right.
Mm-hmm. On a more serious note, I would like my closing message to be that if you are in a position where you can offer help to other people, then please do look out for those elderly in your communities, those pregnant, those disabled or unwell. Think about the fact that a lot of people who are in the diaspora or who come from mainland China are going through a lot of trouble right now. Even that extends also to a lot of Hong Kongers and Taiwanese, a lot of South and Southeast Asians as well. Think about sex workers, domestic workers, queer folks. So when we talk about taking care of each other, it isn't just taking care of certain identities, but it's about the practice of really looking out for everybody that you can. Just look out for those who might be more vulnerable than yourself, and if you're in a position to help, then do make the effort to.
You're here.
Yeah.
That's a good one. So, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, you can contact us at Archaeothoughts or any of the other Twitter feeds here. But at Archaeothoughts, you'll be able to find Archaeothoughts on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our email address is archaeothoughts@gmail.com. Links to some of the topics we discuss will be in the show notes eventually. Please give me time. Please like and share this video to help spread the word, to help, maybe it gives, comfort or something, or aid to somebody. But once again, thank you. Be safe. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. If need be, you may see us again. I'll be doing something on this channel, but we may be together again some point. But if not, I thank my panel for joining me now, and I thank you for watching